What if I told you that despair isn't the enemy of hope, but its hidden twin? That in the darkest feelings, grief, anger, even desperation, there lies not just pain, but purpose. In a world on fire, when climate disasters grow more real every day, the question isn't whether we should stay hopeful, but what kind of hope truly sustains us. This is the story of hopeful pessimism, and how it might be our most honest and powerful response to the crisis of our time. Introduction to the concept. In her groundbreaking book, Hopeful Pessimism, philosopher Mara van der Lugt argues that it's not blind optimism that carries us forward, but rather a commitment to act even when success isn't guaranteed. Drawing inspiration from ancient philosophers and modern climate activists, she redefines what it means to hope in an age of despair. Hopeful pessimism, as she calls it, isn't about pretending things are fine. It's about facing the abyss and choosing to act anyway. Greta Thunberg and honest activism. Consider climate activist Greta Thunberg. She doesn't offer comforting illusions. Instead, she gives space to anger, sadness, even grief. Emotions often dismissed as too dark or too negative. But Mara argues, and Greta proves, that these emotions can be fuel. Greta's refusal to sugarcoat the truth is exactly what has energized millions. She exposes how the language of hope is often weaponized by politicians to justify inaction, saying, "We hope for a better future," while continuing business as usual. But Greta flips that script. She doesn't promise hope in the traditional uplifting sense. She demands urgency, and she shows that it's possible to care deeply, to grieve deeply, and still fight fiercely. Emotional honesty versus forced positivity. One of the most powerful ideas Mara shares is that being forced to perform hopefulness is not just dishonest, it's harmful. When we're told to stay positive no matter what, we're essentially told to suppress the most honest parts of our experience. Anger, despair, grief. These are real, valid responses to a collapsing climate, rising inequality, and political failure. And suppressing them doesn't just harm us emotionally, it weakens movements too, because change doesn't always come from cheerfulness. Sometimes it comes from people refusing to look away, from saying, "This is not okay," and standing in that pain together. Commitment beyond hope. So what sustains us when hope, in the traditional sense, is gone? Mara's answer is bold: commitment. Commitment to values like justice, compassion, truth, even when the future looks bleak, even when we don't know if we'll succeed. This kind of moral clarity doesn't depend on forecasts or guarantees. It's about doing what's right, because it's right. She reminds us that many movements in history, civil rights, anti-apartheid, women's suffrage, weren't powered by certainty. They were powered by moral duty, not by comfortable optimism. Cruel optimism and the burden of forced hope. Mara warns about something she calls cruel optimism, the insistence that we must always be cheerful and hopeful even when the world is burning. This false hope becomes a form of emotional gaslighting. It burdens people already burdened. When someone is experiencing legitimate despair, asking them to stay positive can feel like silencing, not support. True hope, she says, must make space for despair, for honesty, and for the messiness of human emotion. Because only then can we find a way of being that's both sustainable and real. Hope versus despair, or is the real opposite commitment? What if the real opposite of despair isn't hope, but commitment? Not a naive belief that everything will be okay, but a courageous decision to act, even when nothing is guaranteed. That's the heart of hopeful pessimism. You may feel lost, even desperate, but you still get up. You still care. You still fight. And sometimes, even despair itself can spark action. Just like hope can shove us out the door, Mara believes despair, the right kind, can too. Not the kind that paralyzes, but the kind that says, "We can't keep living like this." Despair, then, can be a kind of awakening, a secular form of faith. Is hopeful pessimism just another form of faith? In many ways, yes, but not the religious kind that promises everything will make sense in the end. This is a secular faith, a faith not in outcomes, but in values, a faith not in victory, but in integrity. As Mara says, this is a kind of hope beyond hope, one that doesn't depend on success, but still compels us to act with love, compassion, and justice. Final words: darkness and the door to good. Mara leaves us with a haunting yet inspiring image. With eyes full of darkness, there can still be that strange, shattering openness, like a door cracked open for the good to make its entry into life. That's the paradox of hopeful pessimism. In admitting our despair, we don't give up, we open up. To truth, to each other, to a future that, while uncertain, is still worth fighting for. Call to action. So, if you've ever felt overwhelmed by the world, if you've struggled to stay hopeful in the face of disaster, know this: you don't have to fake optimism. You don't have to suppress your grief. Let those feelings breathe, and then ask yourself, what do I care about enough to stay committed, no matter what? That might just be